One of the things that I've noticed and kind of scratched my head about is this boom and bust hiring cycle, where things get a little bit tough. Mortgage companies lay off a bunch of people. Things start to get good again. They hire a bunch of people. Is that good leadership?
You're going to have your ups. You're going to have your downs. You're going to have your, cycles where you're going to have to hire more. That's inevitable. I think it's preparing that in between when that boom happens on how you're going to prepare for that.
A good sailor is made during bad weather. Anybody can sail in good weather, but it's the bad weather that you find out if you're going to be a good sailor or not. And that's what a leader is.
I'm thrilled to welcome Fobby Naghmi and Ginger Bell to Powerhouse. Both are longtime executives in the mortgage industry. Ginger and Fobby recently published a book called Leadership Matters. Ginger, we'll start off with you. Why does leadership matter?
Well, first of all, Diego, thanks for having us on. And hello to my friend Fobby, who, leadership, why does leadership matter? Leadership is everything, honestly. Whether you are leading yourself, whether you are leading a group of volunteers, whether you're, leading your kid's soccer team, whether you're, leading an entire organization, whether it's a nonprofit or your company, everything begins with leadership. And that's what brought us to this entire project of this book, is a conversation Fobby and I were having about just that. What is leadership and why does it matter?
So, Fobby, there are thousands of books on leadership. Why did you and Ginger decide to publish another one?
Yeah, I think, kind of echoing what Ginger, kind of bouncing off what she was just saying. But to me, it's like everyone has a voice. And as leaders, we all have our own unique individual voices, even though we may be influenced by other people's voices. And it's about sharing those voices and those thoughts that we have. So sometimes, Diego, in my own career, in my own, however long I've been, 37 years now, right, that I've been selling, I can't tell you how many times I've heard something and finally one day I'll hear you say it and I'm like, oh my God, Diego's a genius. You know what I mean? Even though I might have heard it 18 different times from 18 different people, but that one day I was ready to hear it and you happen to say it and it's always anchored in my head now. And I'm always going to give Diego Sanchez credit for that. So that's why I think, when we have ideas and we have thoughts, it's just important to get them out there. And we did not, at least I can say this, Ginger, I don't know about you, but I didn't expect the kind of success. I've been moved from the first days that we began to really put this together and see all the authors come together, Diego. I was really like, holy cow, what is going on here? And so, yeah, this has been an amazing thing. And I'm really glad that Ginger and I were able to put this out there for the world.
It's a really interesting book. And you mentioned voices, leadership voices. You've got a lot of different voices that you're sharing in this book. Ginger, why did you decide to go that route where you're trying to bring in a lot of different experts from the industry to talk about leadership, as opposed to just you and Fobby talking about leadership?
Well, again, it comes back to that. I believe leadership is a collective. And in our industry, specifically, we have so many different verticals. And so when we selected the authors to be a part of this collaborative, we specifically wanted to have individuals who could have a voice from those different areas, because our industry is not just about loan origination. We always think that, right? And that obviously is what, feeds the fire. But there's a lot that goes around to that. So we wanted individuals who were involved in technology, individuals who were involved in services, individuals who were just getting started, honestly, on their leadership role. And that was the goal, is to really have that opportunity for everyone to see a part of themselves. As an industry, we stand right now where we are with the challenges that we've had over the last several years, having lost probably half of originators. And for all the companies that provide those supporting roles, it's that coming together. It's like that, again, that leadership. It's like having those conversations. And Bobby, we have been surprised at how this has created a lot of those conversations and allowed that connection to happen. And that's what's really been cool about that is being able to do that.
Fobby, there are probably 16 or 17, maybe more different authors or of chapters in this book. When you went through the editing process with Ginger, and I know it can be hard to pick your favorite child, right? Like, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but like, were there any chapters that just jumped out at you as like, wow, there's really a lot to unpack here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I've never been one to mince my words, and you know, I mean, I try to be as honest as possible, and there were a lot of amazing chapters. I have to tell you that I think, you know, my friend Gabe Gillen probably wrote a really powerful one. And I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. It was very moving. If you get the book, his chapter really defines leadership from a different perspective on the ripple effect. And I thought that was amazing. Alex K, are you doing your best? I mean, and he was on our podcast yesterday, Leadership Matters, and we were talking about that. Like, and really, when you think about it, like, he's 5'5", right? And so the analogy is he goes and plays basketball, and the coach says, go and be a center. He's going to give his best, but maybe his best is just not good enough to compete against a 7'1" center. so it's these amazing chapters, and these are the standout ones, right? Obviously, I think for me, these were pretty good. Is there a favorite though, Diego? I don't know if there's a favorite, because it's kind of like, you know, it's a blanket, right? A tapestry. And how could you take one of the squares out of the tapestry? It would have a hole in it. So collectively, it's one voice. And our goal, to Ginger's point, was to, you know, look at different aspects like loan officers, founders, CEOs, EVPs, SVPs. You know, I mean, all these different titles are all in here. To one, I mean, my friend Eleni, who's not even in the mortgage business, but she is a serial entrepreneur. So totally different perspective from her. And I think these are just the kind of things that make this book so unique and so timely. Quite honest, I think right now is a very, you know, once again, I'm not saying anything new here, but I've been doing mortgages now it'll be 31 years momentarily, right? This is the most challenging 2.5 years that I think I've seen ever. And this is really the time that we need a book like this.
The times are tough. And you mentioned a 5'5", someone who's 5'5", going up against a 7'1" center on the basketball court. Ginger, the industry's kind of felt like that for the past couple of years. No matter how good you are, it's just really difficult. There isn't much origination happening. And thankfully for people who live in those homes, there isn't a lot of default either. But that's another part of the industry that isn't really happening right now. So neither sides of the industry are really very active. How does a good leader manage his team and his company, or her team and her company, through these tough times?
Well, there's a lot of lessons in the book, and again, it goes back to, that's why we wrote this. You know, leaders are developed during tough times, not during easy times, and so having that sense to be able to lead through, not just to the next stage, is very important. And so there's a lot of stories that are told throughout this. There's one, I think it was Keith Cantor, his chapter was on red pen culture. And he specifically talked about that as far as, you know, managing through change, leading through change, being able to give people that collective voice to be able to share their fears and to be able to have a plan. How do you create a plan? And good leaders aren't necessarily those that say, hey, here's a plan. Good leaders can often say, what is that plan? What does that look like? And how are we going to put this together? And collectively, we're going to get through that. So the book has so many stories that lead through that. Marshall Sparkman shares a very personal story of being in the military and having to make a decision to leave the military when he finally thought he was going to be a career military, and he decided to leave. And that personal, almost that sense of I've lost, I've failed. And I think being a leader, you have to recognize that failure is okay and how to adjust and how to pivot through failure. And so going through what we're going through right now and have been going through in the industry for a few years can feel like failure. But it's a matter of being able to learn from others and to look for those opportunities and to pivot and to grow. And so again, it comes back to oftentimes just hearing stories from someone else and what they did. And it goes back, that's why we did this book. It's like, you need that right now. We need a collective right now. We need to, as an industry, be able to come together, grow as leaders. I mean, when was the last time? I mean, you said, Diego, there's thousands of leadership books. And yes, there are. I used to be a corporate trainer with Dale Carnegie Training. I taught the Leadership Matters course. And I talk about it in my chapter. It was probably one of the most impactful things that I had in terms of leadership is learning from other leaders and how they grew and what they do. And so I think we really need that in our industry to be able to continue to grow, not just build new leaders, but grow as leaders.
Fobby, do you think there's a leadership deficit in mortgage?
So, wow. Okay, let me sit up straight for this one. Is there a leadership deficit? I think there are good leaders and there are bad leaders. And we've all seen our share of both, right? And so is there a deficit? I think there is a deficit, sure. But it's based on the way the mortgage industry itself is. So I'll give you a great example. You have a top producer in the branch, inevitably he'll become the manager, whether he likes it or not, right? Just because one day it's like his turn. Maybe he's not guided for leadership, or she's guided for leadership. I should, he or she, right? So we create that deficit ourselves. Just because we think someone's a top performer, they're going to be a great leader one day, and they may not be. And so as a industry, we need to kind of reframe ourselves and really ask ourselves, this, by the way, this isn't an original thought. Casey Cunningham and I were talking about this years ago. Alex K kind of talked about it yesterday in the podcast. And once again, Alex gave me a great analogy. And think about this, Diego, when we talk about deficit, right? How it's created, right? Because that's what you got to get to is the root of how it got created. Now, I don't know if you guys are football guys or not, but I am. I'm a huge football guy. So Kansas City Chief coach Andy Reid walks up to his star quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, and said, "Hey, buddy, I know you won me 2 Super Bowls, but I need you to be the quarterback coach now." He would be fired the next day. And that's what we do in our industry is we take the top performer and we say, "Hey, man, I know you've been giving me some great months and great years. And you know what? I got this branch that I need a manager. Go sit in it now." And I've done that myself, Diego. I'm guilty of that. And so I'm not saying anything that I have not done and I've been wrong about. And I caused one of my top producers to literally exit my company because of my decision to make him a manager and his inability to say, "Fob, I don't want to do that." So we create the deficit, Diego, if you really want to get to the root of it. So that's where I think the deficit is being created from.
Ginger, do you think that practice needs to change? Where we promote the top producer to manager, or do you think that you're a former educator, trainer, coach? Do you think we can train those folks to become good managers, or should we?
So I think the better question is when they get to that point of producing. And Fobby, you're so right. It's like, hey, you're number one. Now you're going to lead everyone, and they're kind of like, okay, what do I do? So I think the first question is, do you want to do that? And does it make sense? Not just be an automatic, right? And then the second is, how can you equip them to do that? And I had many years ago, I was a training director for Plaza Home Mortgage, and they had promoted an individual to be a regional manager who had been an account executive. Same kind of scenario, wholesale runs into the same thing. And so he called me up and he says, "Ginger," he goes, "I've never been a manager." And that there's a there's manager and there's leader, right? That's a whole nother conversation. And so now he's going to be a regional manager. And he said, what would you recommend that I do to equip myself? Because we need to teach them. We need to teach them those leadership skills. Those are not necessary. Just because you're good in sales doesn't necessarily mean you're good in leadership. And so, and he called, and I told him to take the Dale Carnegie leadership training for managers, and he did. And and it helped him. It helped him so much. It helped him to prepare. There's certain things that you need to do in terms of framing for individuals, leading individuals, managing individuals. One of my favorite books that I give to leaders is called The Shackleton Way, and it's about Ernest Shackleton. And it talks about him and his voyage, 3 years, stranded in the Antarctic, did not lose one single person. And this book goes through each of his leadership principles that he used to help those men survive. And I mean, Fobby, you talk about we're in a challenging time. Imagine being stuck in the Antarctic 3 years with nothing. And he lost no one. And so it is so much of the mindset. And that's the deficit. The deficit we have is preparing people to be leaders. And that's why this book is so important.
Well, think about this also. This is pretty interesting, Diego. But think when you're in any professional sport, you're getting paid millions of dollars, right? So it's not like you're going in for free, not like your 12-year-old kid playing some junior Pop Warner football. You still have coaches. So the coach is not saying, hey, I need you to throw 5 yards more. He's saying, hey, put your heel down and release it 2 seconds quicker. And you might actually get that 5 extra yards. They're teaching them how to get the 5 extra yards, even though they're paying them millions of dollars. And yet we in the mortgage business expect somebody who's a top performer to just come in and be a branch manager, or regional vice president, or whatever it is, without any coaching, anything to get them prepared for that moment. So it's really, like, once again, we are creating that deficit ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still relatively new to the housing industry and to mortgage. I joined HousingWire about 6 years ago. And one of the things that I've noticed and kind of scratched my head about is this boom and bust hiring cycle, where, things get a little bit tough. Mortgage companies lay off a bunch of people. Things start to get good again. They hire a bunch of people. Ginger, is that good leadership?
Well, it's hard in our industry because we can have very big swings. And so I think that's reactionary leadership. Is it good leadership? No, but it is reactionary. And sometimes, especially through what we had during the pandemic, when all that happened, I mean, there was a lot. Where the opportunity lies to be a better leader is that in between space, because that boom is not going to last. And so it's preparing for that bust. That is a good leader. And so being able to prepare and in the preparation that your team knows that you know what direction you're going and that they trust that. And so that is what's important. You're going to have your ups. You're going to have your downs. You're going to have your, cycles where you're going to have to hire more. That's inevitable. I don't anticipate, and I could be completely wrong, but I don't think we're going to have those big swings like we did because rates did drop so much. And I don't anticipate that that's going to happen unless, who knows? But I think it's preparing that in between when that boom happens on how you're going to prepare for that on the other side.
Fobby, there are several lenders that have been leaning in and grabbing market share despite the challenging market. And that to me seems like leadership. Are there any CEOs in mortgage that you respect a lot and admire?
I think there's plenty of CEOs that I respect and admire. I don't want to name them because I don't think that's fair to do that, right? Unfortunately, so I'll keep that to myself. But there are plenty of them because, once again, being in the industry for as long as I have, I get to meet a lot of them and I get to talk with a lot of them. And there are some really smart, intelligent CEOs out there. that are not reactive, by the way, quite honestly, to what Ginger was just saying. You know what I mean? I like that you ask Ginger questions first and come to me because I can kind of bounce off for her. Makes it easier for my brain to function. But like when you're a CEO, I think they're taking market share is one thing, right? But I want to kind of go back to that contraction point because look, I mean, just like we were saying earlier, you know what I mean, and I learned it from boating, right? That a good sailor is made during bad weather. Anybody can sail in good weather, but it's the bad weather that you find out if you're going to be a good sailor or not. And that's what a leader is, right? So grabbing market share right now may be, I don't want to say easy, but it's not as difficult as it may seem, right? But off-ramping gets difficult. And so how do we prepare for that off-ramp? Because I was part of a company, Diego, and I want to get into specifics, where the CEO off-ramped 4 different times and kept telling us this was the last time. And so you begin to lose that trust. You begin to lose that comfort level, right? So the CEOs who are able to kind of walk you through that off-ramp in a way that's more methodical, that's more understandable, it's never easy. That's a very tough conversation because the impact you're having on people's families, every leader understands that. Unfortunately, for the greater good, it's necessary. And there's nothing you can do about it in any industry like that. We're not exclusive in the mortgage industry with that. But I think the good CEOs that I've become friends with over the years, they understand the importance of communication, clear, transparent communication. And by the way, Ginger, I mean, Keith was on my show yesterday, and the red pen that he talks about in his chapter is more like a safe place. So if you hold up the safe place, red pen, that means that I can have a conversation with you and we're going to have a neutral space where all dialogue is open. That's a hell of a leader, Diego. I mean, you're talking about, you create that environment. And by the way, the Leadership Matters title came from my friend Jay Duran, who has a show called Culture Matters. And we were talking about how culture and leadership during adversity, that's when it shows up who you really are.
I've noticed that positive daily habits are critical to my success as a leader. I start off every workday prospecting and developing business, usually on LinkedIn. What do each of you do to kick off your workday? And I'll start with Ginger.
So I work on a lot of projects, and so my workday begins with honestly just sitting down and planning just the first projects I'm going to work on in my quiet time. So I block out my morning for that, and then get into the rest of the day as far as whether it's prospects or talking to our existing clients. And I think really the most important thing for me personally is the planning aspect of it, knowing what are the priorities, what are the things that need to be done today, what are the long-term projects, and then picking out little pieces out of those long-term projects that can be added to the list for today. And for me, that's what works in terms of managing my day and managing my business.
For me, Diego, I'm an early riser, so I get up like 4:30 in the morning. And so for me, my morning is I think the first hour and a half to 2 hours is meditation, grounding, prayers, and then physical exercise or yoga. One of the two will happen where I'm moving my body around and I'm kind of getting, you know what I mean? But it has to start with me being grounded. Something I started doing about 7 years ago. And I noticed that because so often life becomes so hectic. And we want to get into our emails. We want to find out what's going on in the news. Want to find out what's happening in the bond market. All that, and it's gonna be there no matter what time I check on it, right? But if I'm not in the right space, if I'm in the wrong mental space to handle that first email, then it all goes downhill really quickly. And what my meditation coach really kind of like really told me and was really profound that one day, that we start off by watching the news. Everything is blowing up. Planes are crashing. Skyrocket inflation, blah, blah, blah. We eat some donuts. We watch some more bad news. And then we take that energy out in the world. And it crashes with everybody else's energy. So if I can just stop the cycle and get grounded in gratitude and reflection on how far and how great life is, no matter where it's at, because there's always something positive in our lives every single day that we can kind of gravitate towards and make that radiate within ourselves. And once I find that, then the worst email in the world is not going to take me away from my being grounded. And those emails all get taken care of by sooner or later, one way or the other.
I love that. What a great way to start the day. So how can someone get their hands on Leadership Matters?
So it's available on Amazon. So go to Leadership Matters, which, by the way, we're very happy. We hit 3 bestseller lists. We're number 1 in mortgages. And so we're very excited. So thank you for those of you who have ordered. So it's on Amazon. And then you can find us at leadershipmatters.us. We've been recording several podcasts. Bobby's been hopping on. Our goal is to have each one of our authors on the podcast, so continuing over time. And the other thing that I think is important to share is that the proceeds from the sales of this book also goes to help a not-for-profit organization, which one of our authors, Gabe Gillian, sits on the board, and it's called A Need We Feed. And they are an organization that provides food to those, obviously, who are in need of that. And we wanted to do that. So we wanted this to be not just a movement in terms of helping to build our industry, but also to give back and to help that organization. And as we go, we might change it to another organization, but right now that's the organization that we're providing to. And that's going to be part of Potapalooza in December, right, Fobby?
Yeah. We do a Potapalooza, Diego, every year. It goes about 6 to 7 hours live. Every podcast from the West Coast to the East Coast, everywhere in between, keynote speakers. We do a lot of live fundraising. Last couple of years, we've been doing an organization called So Others Might Eat Some. This year, we decided to go with a Need We Feed up in New Jersey. And I think, once again, it's a great event. It's a great cause. All the leaders felt this was a great way to give the proceeds of the sales. And once again, if you give back, that's the greatest thing in life.
Amazing. I think we'll end there. It's a great place to end. Fobby, Ginger, thank you so much for joining me on Powerhouse today.
Thank you, guys.